Welcome, everybody. This is Greg Mears, and if you are looking for the webinar on the role of the supervisor, how to become an effective supervisor, you are in the right place. We're just going to hang on a moment, let a few more people join, and we'll be back and getting started in about 30 seconds. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Looks like we have a lot of people joining the webinar. I want to first introduce myself and welcome everybody to the role of the supervisor webinar. I've been in the cost center industry for about 23 plus years. Been working probably about eight or so years as a consultant. Internationally as well as domestically, and currently I'm the managing director of call center best practices, and I continue to focus on leadership development and efficiency initiatives. I've got a special guest on today named Joe Guider. He's been in the industry 25 years with business planning, technology, and project implementation, as well as working on IT projects, business process reengineer, and training development. I had the opportunity to work with Joe. I met Joe about 4 years ago. We were on a project in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and over the past 4 or so years, I've got to witness Joe work with leadership development and really help the frontline leaders within each organization develop their skills. So welcome, Joe.
Thank you, Greg. Great to be here.
So let's go ahead and to be respectful of everybody's time. I'm sure they're pressed with a lot of things to do. Let's go ahead and just jump in and get started.
Where we'd like to start is with the assumption that everyone is seeking to improve the skills of the supervisors, whether or not that supervisor is already in the position or you're appointing someone into a new managerial or supervisory position and want to make sure that their skills are at maximum level. In order to get to that objective or to achieve that objective, we've isolated some 3 key areas that we think are important in driving that result. The first is to make the role of the supervisor very clear so that the person who assumes that position knows exactly what they're responsible for and what the traits and characteristics of that position entails. That's particularly true if they're coming in as a new supervisor. It may mean that they have to think differently. And what we're going to do in this training and talk about in this webinar is establishing that role and the characteristics that make a person successful when they assume that role. Another theme is to look at the supervisor as a person who needs to not only manage the group in the team, but also to be wary of what they are behaving as the supervisor and making sure that their behavior is up to a set of quality standards that we'll talk about in terms of best practice leadership qualities. And then the final theme is that there is a direct link between the roles that assumed by the supervisor and the team that they manage in tying back to the objectives of the organization itself. When they are all aligned, you'll get maximum production and benefit immensely from the role of the supervisor. What we'll see next is some leadership missteps, as we're calling them. Some of the common complaints that we hear and that studies that are taken by industry councils report repeatedly. Some comments are that I work for a bad boss, and some of the behaviors exhibited are listed in that column on the right. Promises are made and not kept. People are not applauded for their good work. They're sometimes not spoken to in terms of attaboy or pat on the back. In some cases, and perhaps the worst scenarios, that when they're talked about negatively or blame is put on them unnecessarily or inappropriately for something that goes wrong. What we'll take a look at in closer depths are some unsettling facts that come out of these studies and then talk about some strategies for changing those. In this particular slide, you see that 3 out of 4, or the majority of employees, report that their boss is the worst and most stressful part of their job. Not their pay, not their commute, not the amount of work that they have to do, but the person for whom they work makes things stressful. A full 50% of employees feel that they're not valued. And one of the things that we'll talk about in terms of characteristics is the importance of recognizing good work and making it known to the person who's performing well. A third item is that there's a great expense, perhaps unseen or uncalculated by most firms, for work that is lost, or productivity that is lost relative to healthcare costs associated with bad productivity, improper management, and lost days, for example, in terms of sick outs or unproductive time. Also, in line with what we're talking about here is that employees with bad managers are usually the least productive workers. They're not motivated. They don't care about the work. There is no passion. And so they're looking to get through the day and to the next paycheck. More than half of the employees working for the federal government talk about dislike for the job because they have bad bosses. As you may know, the federal government and even state and local governments have terrific benefits. So it's not the pay, it's not the workplace conditions, it's not the vacation days or the health benefits. The dissatisfaction is because of poor supervision. Again, over half of the employees say they take a new boss or prefer a new boss as the greatest perk of their particular job. They prefer that rather than a pay raise. Significant answers to this particular survey. 37% of employees say their boss failed to give credit when due. And 44%, nearly half, say that they've been emotionally or physically abused by their supervisor in their career. A sad statement, but the survey results speak for themselves. So what is the result when you put all of those factors together? Productivity is less than what it should be. Therefore, the financial cost is greater to produce whatever output, whether it's a service or a product that your firm is producing. Turnover is probably higher than you wish it to be. There's greater sick out days, people looking to stay away from work whenever they can. Customer service is at a level that's less than it should be to give the organization a brand that people identify with and want to come back to. Revenues are lost, and there's stress on the job, either with individuals or as the team as a whole. So, getting to the solution, how do we fix this? One of the things that we talk about in the training is the traits and characteristics that a supervisor must be aware of, must adopt, and make their own in order to lead the organization to peak performance. There's self-discovery. As we said before, it's not just about managing others, but it's being aware of their own performance as a supervisor against these characteristics and behaviors that we'll talk about in the section called supervisor traits. And then again, cause and effect. We think it's very important to believe and drive the linkage between the roles that supervisors play, as well as the people that they manage, and the missions of the organization as a whole. So for supervisor traits, we're going to be talking about characteristics, how they translate into behaviors, and the benefits that you can receive when everything syncs appropriately. Some supervisor traits are listed here, and this material comes from the role of a supervisor module itself. So for example, if you look down at the 4th bullet point, we're committed to teamwork and employee participation in decisions. So one particular trait suggests that there's good communication between the supervisor and individuals within the team, as well as the team itself. Everybody feels as if they're a participant in the team. One of the characteristics, one of the traits of a supervisor will be to get everybody involved and understanding what the mission of the team is and working toward a common objective. Each one of these traits is dealt with in greater detail in the training module, and discussed at length in a participatory way with the participants in the training module. Self-discovery. Each of the supervisors must buy into the role that they have to play. There's some interesting stories out of sports and out of entertainment where a coach or a director or a manager will recruit top talent and ask them to assume certain roles for the good of the team, for the good of the program. So, for example, in athletics, top scorer in their high school might be recruited by Krzyzewski down at Duke, but asked to play a more defensive role because they excel in that area as well. Krzyzewski, Coach K, spends a lot of time talking about the roles that each of those individuals that he recruits and gives scholarships to form a team that becomes one of the top-ranked teams in the nation repeatedly. From the field of entertainment, a director will explain to their even seasoned actors and actresses what role they're performing and how they're going to fit into the overall composition of the production itself. Once you get buy-in, once you get awareness of the roles, you have to examine effort, and that has to be part of the self-motivation of the supervisors and the people they manage, and repeatedly looked at from time to time to make sure things are going as expected. Again, part of the self-discovery section in the training module is an activity that asks participants to describe the characteristics of the best supervisor and the least effective supervisor that they have had. They'll compare their own experiences and own answers with the class, and each one will be talked about, perhaps ranked, depending upon the direction that you want to take the training in, and isolating those that are most important for your group and the ones that you want to work on as an activity to make sure that your group is supervised and managed well. And then finally, cause and effect. Purpose really is something that needs to be defined. Why are we employed here? What is the mission? What is my individual specific role in the mission of the company and in the mission of the team? How do they align? And when we get that squared away and everybody buys into it, we have a very, very high probability of achieving our objectives. Again, one of the activities will be to set proper expectations. So again, I'll look at the first one here. Build effective relationships with representatives through appropriate self-disclosure and getting the representatives to self-disclose themselves. Very first activity that we have as part of this role of the supervisor training module is to answer some personal questions, not intimate questions or anything people would not want to answer, but things that would introduce them to the group outside of the normal setting that they have in their business relationship. And that begins to the process of self-disclosure and getting everyone in the group to begin to act in a way where they feel more comfortable talking to each other. And that will lead to an opportunity to talk about things that may be more difficult and job-related down the future. Why? Because they will have practiced, and it begins with the training module right here. So what's the effects then of good supervisors? It's really the opposite of all the negative things that many businesses are experiencing. Rather than losing productivity, you'll see productivity gains. There'll be more output for the same amount of input. That'll result in reduced costs. You'll reduce your attrition. Customer service will improve. We would expect revenues to go up, and stress will be reduced significantly. From a study, so we can put some quantitative numbers around the effects of good and even better supervision. Productivity increases by as much as 66%. Workers respond to good supervision, buy into the activities, and understand what they're doing. Attrition rates go down significantly by as much as 50%. Customer service improves by having strong supervisors who acknowledge and make the team believe that good customer service is a requirement and necessity of the job that they have for the company. And customer loyalty as a result goes up. People respond well to good service and loyal customers, and will stay with the organization at length.
Thanks, Joe. You covered pretty well the characteristics, the behavior, the buy-in, the self-discovery, all the things that help with improving the results within organizations from the frontline leadership perspective, and then which translates to improvement for the overall organization and to the customers. So moving forward, I want to talk to you about one of the modules that we have called the role of the supervisor. So the learner objectives of the role of the supervisor, we really take a look at the impact the frontline leadership will have, what the qualities that are needed to be an effective supervisor, what duties need to be performed. And, once completion through this module, the supervisor will have an understanding of their role within the organization, which is critical. They'll understand their expectations and how behaviors support or destroy those expectations. And they'll be able to use these skills needed to be an effective supervisor. And what this basically equates to, if you take a look at it, the traits, the characteristics, the objectives combined equal positive performance. So the role of a supervisor module is extremely interactive, and our goal is learning by doing and discovery by interactive exercise and discussion. So throughout the module, you'll see examples from real work and personal experience. We also have a companion module called the Facilitator's Guide, which helps the individual, whomever has been designated to help train and facilitate this learning objective. It's a complete facilitator guide that aligns with the participant guide. So it instructs you step by step what to do next. So if you take a look at, there's two components of the role of supervisor. There's the participant guide that each individual that is being trained will have in their hands, and you also have a facilitator's guide. We developed this out of need, and let me step back and kind of explain or describe why this all started. Several years ago, I was working in a very large call center, and we were experiencing tremendous success. And the challenge we had is we needed to ramp up very quickly, but we didn't have supervisors. So we developed a career path for our call center agents. And we went through a hiring process, identified those that were going to be hired. But how do we provide them the skills necessary to make the transition to a supervisor? That was our biggest challenge. So they were a great rep, but now they had to become a supervisor, and they had to be concerned with the overall performance of a team. So we developed the role of supervisor to support that transition for new hired supervisors within the organization. Then what we did is we rolled it out, and so we have a proven track record. We rolled it out and trained all of our newly hired supervisors, and we tracked performance before and after this module. And what we discovered is that we were seeing tremendous opportunity and tremendous results against performance once they had been through this module. And this is the exact same module that Joe and I trained on our consultant engagements with our clients. So to get in a little bit more detail, the role of supervisor is focused on performance-based. This is just a snapshot of one of the pages, one of the areas within the role of supervisor. But if you look at the module contents, we cover, obviously we cover the introduction and walk people through the expectations for a supervisor, because not everybody knows that. Then we talk about what makes a supervisor exceptional. So we talk about supervisor qualities. We talk about your qualities, or you as the trainee's qualities. Then we do a leadership behavior questionnaire that helps kind of set the baseline. And then we talk about the work of a supervisor, what's expected, the supervisor's time, how to go about using the time to derive performance within your team. And then we talk about behaviors of exceptional and of average supervisors and do a comparison. And mind you, all these different components, these different agenda items within the role of supervisor are all interactive and focus on self-discovery. And then we talk about performance supervisor's duties. So here's a little example. I took a snapshot of both of a couple pages from the facilitator's guide. And as you can see, it provides the facilitator with directions on exactly how to facilitate the training session to maximize it. And it's interesting, I stumbled on a recent study by McKinsey that found 80% of the frontline leaders report dissatisfaction with their job performance, and 70% of senior managers agreed. And you know what the primary reason was? The path of least resistance. And what I mean by that is when somebody is promoted and they're not super comfortable and they don't have the confidence yet, they will resort to what they know best, and they'll step back and focus on becoming an individual contributor because that's what they were good at before. The goal of the role of supervisor is to help that transition and provide them with the skills and the confidence so they don't resort back to that, because that's not going to help the team perform. So if you look at the leadership development, the role of a supervisor, as we rolled it out, we tested it, we saw a 96% improvement with performance. We saw a 65% drop in attrition and a 40% improvement with attendance. And that's all because we have a proven formula that works. It's very interactive, and two components that are key are the participant and the facilitator's guide, which assign responsibilities to each member that's responsible for that performance. So I came across this recent quote by Sam Walton: "Outstanding leaders go out of their way to boost the self-esteem of their personnel. If people believe in themselves, it's amazing what they can accomplish." So that confidence is critical. So you might ask, the role of supervisor normally sells for $147, which includes both the participant and the facilitator's guide. What we're doing on this webinar is we want to reward you and thank you for spending time. So we have a webinar special for $97. In addition, we have a fast start webinar bonus, and this is really a roll up your sleeves session to help jumpstart the role of the supervisor module within your organization. During this session, we're going to strategize on how to present and how to maximize your performance. We're going to show you how to assess the results, your positive results, and we're going to answer any questions that you may have and provide detail. And of course, we have a 60-day money-back guarantee. Our goal here is to allow you to get the documents in your hand, look through them, test them out on a team or two, be able to sit on the Fast Start webinar, and fully assess the value of this. So at this point, let me ask anybody if they have any questions.
If they come in and it's really directed at something that I can answer, Greg, I'd be happy to jump in. I would say on that bonus, I'll just add, if you'll permit me, on that bonus webinar where we suggest that we're going to jumpstart your use of role of supervisor, which by the way has a very, very long shelf life. You can train not only the first set, let's call it 10 new supervisors, but you could use it for every set for the next coming years, and then improve on it with your own materials if you wish, but it's something that you can keep and use for a long, long time.
All right, Joe, we're getting some questions coming in now. The first question is, how is this product delivered? I'll field that one. This is you'll have immediate access once you purchase, and you'll be able to download both the participant guide and the facilitator guide. There's a members area where you'll be able to download that information to your desktop, and you'll have that electronically so you can duplicate that for your training sessions. We do have another question that's a little bit off the modules. If we don't have a facilitator, do you have that service?
Well, I can take that one, Greg. I myself love to instruct and teach. In addition to the 25 plus years of business consulting that Greg spoke about in the introduction, I've been for a longer period than that, actually been an adjunct professor and professor of economics in the business school at several universities in New Jersey. I enjoy teaching and instructing, and so to answer the question directly, yes, we do offer that services, and if you don't have anyone in mind who can facilitate or lead the training, we certainly could and will entertain the thought of coming to your site and doing one or more of the modules depending upon your interest and your needs. What we would like to do is designate someone who could be a facilitator in the future so that they could sit in and perhaps even co-host, if you will, or co-present with me so that they become more comfortable with the material, and we could work at that while we're on site.
So like a trainer.
Exactly.
Perfect. Okay. Here's another question. Who is this module for the role of supervisor? Well, I'll take that. And if Joe, if you want to add, if you have anything to add in, that'd be great. This really can fall under operations or HR or the training department. The ultimate goal is to drive performance. So we have designed this module and we have rolled it out. We've seen where it's worked, where the training is taking place in, say, a staff meeting, or it could be a formalized training program within your organization, run by the trainers. So really, we designed the role of supervisor to be very flexible, because many organizations, time is limited, and you may have a snapshot of time and you need to roll this out, or you want to roll this out. So to make a long story short is that the overall module has been designed so there's a lot of flexibility built into it, and it allows the trainer to run a formalized or operations team to be able to run it in a short staff meeting time frame.
Are there any other questions, Greg?
Yeah, there's a couple more coming in. We got another question in regards to expectations that you guys talked about during the presentation. Shouldn't the supervisor already know what's expected of them? To answer that question is not necessarily. Assumption can be deadly. So, the thing is, if you're trying to create consistency in your performance, then it's important to spend the time and energy providing the team what is expected, what your expectations are, and delivered consistently. And that overall, so not everybody knows. Some may know, that have some experience, but not everybody has that experience. So it's better to be safe than sorry, and go ahead and train so everybody is on notice and they know what's expected of them. Joe, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I do. Relative to one of the sections in the module itself, Greg, there's a section that we spend some time on identifying the activities that a supervisor would do, and they are distinctly different from being with a team member itself. Regarding the question about shouldn't the supervisor know what to do, Greg's answer not necessarily, I think, says a lot in 2 words. The supervisor, when they see the list of activities that they have to do in terms of mentoring and coaching and disciplining and advancing, occupies a full 100% of their time. They are no longer in a sense, a producer on the floor, but they are rather a specialist in terms of their management and supervisory skills. That's one of the areas of the training that seems to be the most revealing to people who are perhaps less certain about the role of a supervisor or haven't given it much thought. So one of the things that I think is most beneficial from the training is that particular section.
Very good. Very good. Two more questions just came in. When you talk about self-discovery, how impactful is that? Do you want to fill that one, Joe?
I will. I think that self-discovery is very important. There's a phrase in, well, I'll give credit to the Association for Talent Development, a group that I belong to now for several years. They have a publication called Telling Isn't Training. There has to be an engagement that occurs and an adaptation, an adoption of the material by the supervisor in order to make it work over time. So one of the emphasizing foundations that we have for this is that the people talk about and write and make part of their own these understandings and traits of characteristics, and finally execution and use of these skills in their own supervisory roles within the organization. So we emphasize self-discovery as very important. And one of the aspects that we would talk about in the special bonus webinar is how to track that over time. This training should not be a one and done, but it should have life after the training itself, whether you do it over the course of one half day or one full day or whatever accommodation that you make. There should be some follow-up to this in terms of interviews and discussions and feedback regarding all of the things that are talked about in here relative to the role and behaviors of a supervisor.
Awesome, Joe. And, just one point to add, with self-discovery, the light bulb goes off in the employee's head. And, it really, you've heard the phrase, teach somebody to fish rather than give them a fish. This is really providing them, once the light bulb goes off, it's amazing to see how they develop and grow. And the last question, I kind of touched on it before a little bit earlier, but how long does it take to deliver this training? I can fill that one, Joe, or
go for it, Greg.
Okay, so I talked about it a little bit before. We designed the overall training to be flexible because we understand that time is of the essence for some organizations. So this can be trained. It depends on how long you run a staff meeting. You could train this in a staff meeting, or you could train this as an overall a part of the training program, which could be a couple hours in the morning. So I guess the takeaway would be there's some flexibility built in, and it works with whatever type of situation you're faced with. So those are the questions that we've gotten. I don't think we're getting any more. I just wanted to thank you, Joe, for joining the webinar and providing some great information regarding supervisor leadership. And I just want to thank everybody that participated and joined in on this. If you notice under the Q&A, there is a link that you can go to purchase the role of the supervisor for the webinar special. Also, you should see a button that shows up in the chat area to your right, that you can also use to purchase that. And so hopefully we see you on the inside. And again, thank you everybody for taking the time out and joining us on this webinar. And thanks again, Joe.
Enjoyed it, Greg. Thank you.
All right, thank you.